Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for a link to my Amazon store where I've compiled some of the very best items available, including some of my own personal recommendations. Thanks! What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review slash knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Bestech Shodan from, you can see there it says TKT, that's Todd Knife and Tool, and actually the channel associated with Todd Knife and Tool is one of our own here in the YouTube knife community, and that's Zelrick, Z-E-L-R-I-C-K. You should definitely check out his channel. They have done some very cool designs with Bestech, and I've very much enjoyed both aesthetically and functionally all of them. So check out Zelrick, subscribe to his channel. Absolutely. So this is made by Bestech, and if you guys have been watching my channel, then you know my feelings on Bestech. I really like Bestech's quality. They do some budget knives, they do some higher end stuff in titanium and carbon fiber, and this is on the higher end. But they have reasonable prices, and their quality is always just spot on. Very, very comparable with WE knives. So that's really cool. Here's another thing I want to point out real quick. Number one, there will be links for this knife and all the different variants right down in the description where you can pick them up. Number two, this a lot of the common complaints that I hear on my channel with certain knives are, I like it, but I can't get it. Specifically, Strider knives. I know, guys, Strider knives are hard to get a hold of. This knife is very, very Strider-esque. I mean, it's got its own unique thing going on here, but I think a lot of people will agree with me when I say this knife very much resembles the same ergonomic lines and blade type as a Strider knife. So if you've ever wanted to get into, if you've looked at Strider knives and thought, well, I really like the lines, I really like the look of that, but I can't find them, and even if I could, I can't afford it. This is a knife that is both available and you can have for a fraction of the price in full titanium in S35VN. So if that's what you're looking for, then there you go. Let's go ahead and get a measurement on this guy. Overall, oh, by the way, this was sent by the Apex Pass Run Group. Shout out to everybody who's involved with the Apex Pass Run Group. And I appreciate you being able to, providing knives for content on this channel. It's also because of my generous patrons. Thanks so much for making that happen. If you'd like to check out my Patreon, there's a link in the description. Overall length of the Bestech Shodan, which I'm hoping I'm pronouncing correctly, it's coming in at, boy, it's big, 8.5 inches overall. Blade length is coming in at 3.75. Cutting edge, thanks to a very generous and very properly done forward choil, 3¼ inches, which is just fine. This is a very preferable size for me. And also, yeah, this is what I mean by a good forward choil. It's very obvious where my finger's supposed to go. There's no risk of my finger running up on the edge because of that space right there. And it's deep, which means you can choke all the way up on it. It is a full forward choil. Even if you've got really thick or fat fingers, right, you're still going to be able to get in there and be able to work with the knife without actually risking cutting your finger. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons. Up against the Ontario Rat Model 1. Rat 1 is coming in at 8.6 inches overall, so you can see there, they're very, very, very similar in overall size. How about up against the Spyderco PM2? Spyderco PM2 is coming in at 8.3 inches overall. How about up against the Benchmade Reptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue? Ritter Hogue is coming in at 8 inches overall. And last but not least, the Spyderco Para 3. Spyderco Para 3 is coming in at 7¼ inches overall. How's the action on this guy? Well, this knife is running on bearings, and it is a Bestech, which means you can expect it to, for anybody who doesn't know, Bestech always has their detents figured out. They're properly tuned. Their flipper tabs are in a good spot. This one's a small flipper tab, but it's very easy to engage in either a light switch or a push button. It's not nearly as comfortable in a push button situation as it is to light switch it. This zone right here is a little bit sharp. You can see this is where your finger is going to land, and those corners right there are just a little bit sharp. Over time, yeah, if you're sitting and flipping this on the couch, you're okay. If you land a little bit more flat, you're good. But if you light switch it and come straight back like this, you're going to run your finger into that area. I don't know that I necessarily call it a flaw, because if you flat finger it like this, it's going to be okay. Those edges are just a little bit sharp. But man, the flipping action itself, very nearly falls shut, very smooth. It'll probably get smoother over time. Just takes a little bit of encouragement. But yeah, it's very smooth. There's no grittiness, clunkiness, or anything like that in the action. Very happy with that. And on top of that, it's got the little slot, which means you can do the thumb flick or you can do the reverse flick very easily. It's also got a fuller that continues way down here. So you can put your finger wherever you want. If you want to do the flick way up there, or you want to do it, you know, clear down here, it doesn't matter. It's really, I mean, manipulating this knife is very, very easy. Absolutely. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check on this guy. Get out my handy dandy WIA bit selector and WIA magnetic driver, two items that are extremely inexpensive and extremely recommendable. You can find them both down in the Amazon store referenced at the beginning of every video. Just pull up in the store and look for knife maintenance. I'm going to guess, like most Bestechs, the pivot is T8, and I'm hoping the hardware is also T8. Yay! T8! T8. Everything's T8. How about the pocket clip screws? Are we going to get lucky here too? T8. Thank you, Bestech. Everything's T8. That's great. Why? Because the T8 bits and T8 heads are much less likely to strip than a T6 head, which is unfortunately all too common in the knife world. It's also all the exact same size, which means you don't have to switch the bit out. You can just put a T8 in and get to going, right? There's also minimal hardware, which means you've got 2 screws on one side, 2 screws on the other, and the pivot and the pocket clip. Easy, easy. That's how they should all be. Fantastic. What do we got next? Carry profile. Let's put it up to the Para 3 here. In terms of thickness, it's a fairly thick knife. It's not much thicker than the Para 3, but yeah, the titanium does offer it. I mean, this is a big titanium frame lock. You know, it's not Medford thick or anything like that, but it's a fairly big titanium frame lock. It's also a big knife in general and a fairly tall knife in general. So up against the Spyderco PM2 and Para 3, two knives that have awkward carry profiles that nobody ever complains about. You can see there that the flipper tab is pretty small and it's not super prominent because they cut it back right here, so it's actually in line with the back of the frame. But the maximum height on the knife in places is about the same. The PM2 is still a little bit taller. It's about the same length in handle and overall length as the PM2, and it's longer than the Para 3. So this is a big knife. It's a fairly thick knife, and it's also going to be somewhat heavy. Not as heavy as I think people might assume. Let's go ahead and measure blade stock thickness here. Blade stock thickness, it says 153. It's probably 155 thousandths. So you think ZT 0562 thickness or typical ZT thickness. And then weight, because we are looking at milled out titanium scales here. Not going to be crazy. Under 5 ounces for an 8.5-inch full titanium knife. Guys, my full titanium Hinderer XM18s that only come in at 6 1/4 inches, or I'm sorry, 8 1/4 inches overall, generally weigh over 6 ounces. And even if you are getting a titanium scale that's milled out, you're still probably looking at 5.5 ounces. So considering this is 8.5 inches, pretty thick, pretty robust. Yeah, I mean, it's over that ounce and inch mark. It's definitely not going to be appropriate for, I would say, the majority of people. This is still going to be a big knife. It doesn't weigh that much though. So in this case, you want to consider how much room the object is taking up in your pocket over how much it weighs and whether or not that's going to work with your day-to-day setup. But for how big of an object it is, I don't have a problem with the weight. That's right there where I like to carry knives, and this is right there in my style, my size of knife. So whether you are going to carry this to actually use it and beat on it the way that it's intended, or you're just carrying it because you like to carry, you know, just consider how big the object is. And whether or not it's going to fit in the style of pants you like to wear. All right, so anatomy here. Like I said, we are looking at titanium scales that have been tumbled. There's no contouring. They have a lot of interesting lines on here. These holes back here don't really serve any purpose, but what I do like is the polished lips of the bowls. That's nice. I really like that. So I don't necessarily like what I'd consider to be like overly tactical, unnecessary lines. Right? There's a lot of lines that go in a lot of different directions here, and aesthetically, that's not really my thing. The nice thing is that the lines aren't doing anything that take away from the utility of the knife, right? The lines that are holding your hands in place are all in the right spot. This area here, this butt end, which very much reminds me of the gradual rise on the butt end of a Strider, and then the combination of this massive forward choil. That's really, the handle shape, the blade shape, and the ergonomic lines are very, very Strider to me. You can pull up pictures of Striders or the, you know, maybe more so considering this is a flipper on bearings, pull up the Marfione Strider MSG. that very, very similar ergonomically. The blade, I think, more so resembles the .75 AR Strider. So it's kind of like it's kind of like the MSG, the SNG, and the .75 came together and then like became even more hyper tactical, and then was made for the Halo series on Xbox. That's kind of what it reminds me of, right? Like the tectonic, the crazy futuristic looking buildings in the background. So, you know, like lines like this, you know, things like that. This area here, maybe on the pocket clip tube. They're not necessary. They're just little aesthetic features. Some people are really going to like them. Some people aren't. It's not that I hate them. It's just not really my thing. But the reason I'm not going to count off for it is because it doesn't take away anything from ergonomics. It doesn't change anything about the design that would otherwise make it more utilitarian. They're just there, right? This knife comes in a bunch of different configurations. You can get full titanium tumbled with a satin finish. You can get full titanium that in all black wash. You can get a carbon fiber, a marbled carbon fiber front scale for a little bit more money. And then tumbled titanium and satin finish, or you can get a marbled carbon fiber front scale and then a black wash titanium and black wash blade finishes there. So you can kind of pick and choose what you want. Obviously, the marbled carbon fiber ones are going to weigh less. So if you really like the knife and you're like, it's a little bit heavy for me, I can guarantee you the one with the carbon fiber scale is going to weigh less. So that's pretty cool. The finish looks great. Everything is pretty well knocked down here. There are a couple of little sharp spots right here. I mean, this knife definitely does have an angular appearance, and in some places it is a little bit pointy. I wouldn't say it's too bad. I have definitely handled knives that are much, much more aggressive, right? But this area here, like I said, the jimping is, I think, appropriately aggressive. It's not anything ultra sharp. It's going to catch your fingers whether you're wearing gloves or not, so that's fine. You know, using it though, where your hands are going to be, here's the spots where I feel it the most. Here, and on the pocket clip. Up here, I think I'm good. Up here, I'm really comfortable, especially choked up. Some of those hot spots back here are nowhere near as present when you're choked up. But back here, yeah, the pocket clip, it looks cool. It kind of looks like some sort of futuristic sword, but it's a little sharp right here. It's a little angular. You know, those are the places where you're going to feel it. In gloves, not going to be a problem. If you're going to make cuts here and there, maybe pull the knife out 2-3 times a day to make one cut, like most of us do, it's not going to be a problem. If you're going to be holding on to this knife in this position and cutting for an extended period of time, then those hot spots are going to bother you. Just to, you know, make sense of all that. Up here, everything is knocked down. Even up here on the satin finish blade, just barely catching my fingernail, so that's all just fine. I like how the fuller looks. I like being able to interact with it with my finger. You might get a couple of things stuck in there, but you know, while you're cutting, but it's not that big of a deal. Up here, even on the edges of the hole, looks like it's going to be sharp, but it's really not. The blade looks awesome. It carries a reasonable amount of thickness out to the tip. I wouldn't call that tip delicate. You just definitely don't want to be pushing it into wood and prying or anything like that. It is S35VN, which I think is fantastic for a blade like this that I would actually go out and beat on. S35VN being stainless, having good edge retention, you're fairly easy to sharpen, you know, and it's fairly tough for a stainless steel. So yeah, I mean, S35VN is definitely one of my favorite steels to go outside and work with. So I think that's fantastic. Bestech typically does use either S35VN or M390, and I think it was the right choice here. Definitely my favorite area on the knife is the, I would call that oversized, you know, because we don't see that size of choil all too often in the knife world, but I would just say that that's how I want the choil to be. It's big enough for so many different fingers, and there's a clear, you know, it's not just like, oh, here's the edge, you know, it's like, here's this, and then there's a space, and then there's the edge, which means you can really choke up on this thing, put a lot of pressure into this area right here, which is where you're going to, you know, to make those cuts, you know, the maximum amount of your force going into the cut and, you know, ultimately making the task at hand, you know, as easy and straightforward as possible is that's fully possible here because you can get so close to the edge without risking your finger running up on that blade. So that's great. And even back here, you know, plenty, if whatever it is that you're cutting, you know, if you're cutting a cactus and you don't want your hands super close to the blade, well, you've got an option for that too, right? the only example I can think of that. I do like the TRT pivot that looks like, or TKT. I always say TRT. It's TKT, Todd Knife and Tool pivot right there. I think that looks really, really nice. And then the other side is a simple Torx head. Like I said, I like those little holes of the bowls there. I don't like the massive holes on the blade, but a couple of small ones, it adds a little character, so that's nice. There's a little slot for the lanyard. Love the gear pattern backspacer. It goes along with the theme, right? It's got some extra lines there it meets up with. Everything looks great. Really, really like that. The pocket clip is super interesting and 100% goes along with the theme of the knife. It does a pretty good job of slipping in and out of the pocket. It's not a pocket clip that's really going to snag too readily on stuff. And it's very, the retention on the clip, you know, this is a thick titanium clip. It's going to do that. It's a little bit pokey right here, right? In really, really thick pants, you might have to fight it just a little bit. But once you've got that thing in the pocket, it's not going to leave. It does a way better job than the actual Strider that I'm comparing it with in terms of how deep that it carries. It's just sort of a small pyramid that hangs out of your pocket. I wouldn't call it deep carry, but I wouldn't call it shallow carry either. The pocket clip is cool, goes along with the knife. It's just a little bit pokey right here, and that causes a little bit of a hot spot when you're back here and really squeezing it. It's more so this area right here. This is a little bit sharp. It's not crazy sharp, it's just a little bit sharp, right? The knife is perfectly centered, as Bestechs usually are. The blade locks up at something like 25 to 30%. Does have a steel lock bar insert that acts as an over travel stop. Just fantastic. And by the way, it locks out 100% solid. This is one of those knives where I really, no matter how much I wrench on it, I'm not going to achieve any hint of blade play, which is fantastic considering how smooth the knife is. You know, that's kind of, I'm coming to expect that, you know. There's a certain amount of smoothness that I expect with the knife, and then I expect complete and total solidity, right? If I'm getting ultra smoothness and a slight hint of blade play, I will probably crank it down just a little bit and sacrifice some of that smoothness to get absolute lockup. Now, if I've got no smoothness whatsoever, I've got a grindy action or just sort of a stiff action, and I'm feeling blade play, I don't like that at all. I don't want to have any blade play in my knives. You know, in fact, I've handled $20, $30, $40 knives that have zero blade play. We should never have a situation with any blade play. I don't know why I'm focusing on that, because this knife doesn't have any blade play. So what's the verdict here? So little things that I can complain about. There's some sharp edges here or there. You know, just, you know, this is a knife you're probably going to be taking out and, you know, working hard with. So you're probably going to be wearing gloves. If you're going to EDC this knife and you're going to use it 2 or 3 times a day, those hot spots aren't going to bother you. You know, it's just not going to be the thing. This is a big knife. It's not going to work for everybody. The blade length is certainly going to be illegal in a lot of places, right? It does have some, you know, oddly, overly tactical lines that aren't 100%, you know, my taste. Honestly, like the lines here and the lines back here, if they got rid of those and just maybe some different texturing or some different, you know, maybe just contouring, I would have really just gone completely crazy for it. But again, it's just my aesthetic choices coming into play, right? It's just a taste thing. So I'm not really going to count it off for that. The pocket clip looks cool. It's a little bit sharp. What else? What else did I complain about? Oh yeah, this area back here. So this is not a push button flipper. If you try to push button it, it's going to hurt. If you light switch it and you come down with the tip of your finger over and over again, it's really going to start to hurt in that area right there. So you need to kind of flat finger it, right? Other than that, though, there is just way too much to love here to get hung up on those little tiny things. I love that this allows people to kind of get that Strider feel in full titanium with all the little features that we look for in today's modern high-end knife world, right, for way less money. This knife is made in China, but if you know anything about Bestech, you know that their manufacturing quality is super high and they are very competitive with their prices. So this comes in at a completely reasonable, I think, about $225. So yeah, I'm totally on board with that. You can pay $245 and get the marbled carbon fiber ones. If you feel like that's worth it to you, you know, whatever. I don't know why the carbon fiber one would cost more than the titanium one, whatever. As far as this titanium variant goes, I can absolutely recommend it. Like I said, there's going to be links down in the description where you want to pick this up. If you've been looking for a Strider-esque knife, right, that is still its own design and is made with very tight tolerances, excuse me, premium materials, yada, 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 right? Yeah, this is the one to go for, absolutely. So it's going to go in my most recommended knives playlist. Again, make sure to check out Zelric and Todd Knife and Tool. They are, you know, he puts out great content, excellent knife reviewer, and that's where this knife came from, and the design of it, actually. But anyways, guys, that's going to be pretty much it for today's video. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do don't like. So check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on this Metal Complex logo right here and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.